Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. The HOA president told me I didn't own my own driveway. I told him his ego was writing checks his budget couldn't cash. I'm what you might call a detail-oriented person. 30 years as a project manager taught me that assumptions are the mother of all screw-ups, and paperwork is your best friend. When I bought my house 3 years ago, I didn't just read every document twice. I kept copies of everything in what my wife calls my duck around and find out file. Trust me, this habit saved my ass. My property sits on 5 acres at the very end of a cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that thinks it's fancier than it actually is. To get to my house, you drive down a 200-foot paved lane that looks like it could be part of the street system, but isn't. The deed clearly states this lane is private property, 100% mine. I've got the meets and bounds description, the insurable title, the whole 9 yards. When I moved in, there was this sweet, elderly lady living next door who had been using the first 20 feet of my lane to access her garage. The previous owner had given her permission out of kindness, and I saw no reason to change that arrangement. She was quiet, kept to herself, and always waved when she saw me working in the yard. Perfect neighbor, really. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. About 6 months ago, the elderly lady moved to be closer to her daughter. The house sold within 2 weeks to a woman I'll call Karen, because that's exactly what she turned out to be. Karen joined the HOA board before she even finished unpacking, which should have been my first red flag. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in late spring. I was having my coffee on the front porch when I saw the mail truck turn around at the end of my lane like always. Nothing unusual there, but then I noticed Karen standing at the edge of her driveway, hands on her hips, staring at my lane like it had personally offended her. A week later, I found a bill in my mailbox. Special assessment for neighborhood asphalt resurfacing, $2,500. I figured it was a mistake. We had just moved into the neighborhood and maybe the previous owner's name was still on some HOA list somewhere. I tossed it in the junk drawer and forgot about it. Big mistake. The next Tuesday, I was working from home when I heard voices outside. I looked out my office window and nearly choked on my coffee. Karen was standing in my driveway with the HOA president and some guy in a hard hat who was obviously a contractor. They were pointing at my lane and having what looked like a very serious discussion about my property. I walked outside to see what was going on. "Can I help you folks with something?" I called out as I approached them. The HOA president, a guy who always looked like he was trying to sell you a timeshare, turned to me with this fake smile that made my skin crawl. "Oh, perfect timing," he said. "We were just discussing where the crew should start the paving work tomorrow. We'll begin here at the shared access point since it connects to the main cul-de-sac." I felt that familiar tingle you get when someone is about to try to pull a fast one on you. "I'm sorry, shared access point," I said, keeping my voice level. "This is my private driveway." Karen let out this condescending laugh that could have curdled milk. "That's adorable," she said, "but you might want to check your HOA bylaws before you embarrass yourself further. Anything connected to the cul-de-sac is HOA maintained and provides public access for residents." The contractor looked uncomfortable and started studying his clipboard like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Ma'am, sir," I said, addressing both of them, "I appreciate your concern, but this lane is private property according to my deed. I've got all the documentation if you'd like to see it." The HOA president waved his hand dismissively. "Look, I don't know what your realtor told you, but we've been managing this neighborhood for 15 years. We know which roads belong to the community. Don't worry about the assessment. We'll just add it to your annual dues." That's when I knew this wasn't going to be resolved with a friendly conversation. These people had already made up their minds, and facts weren't going to get in their way. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said. "This road doesn't belong to the community. It never has. I'll be happy to provide you with copies of the survey and deed to clear this up." Karen stepped forward, and I could practically see the entitlement radiating off her like heat from asphalt. "The previous owner never had any issues with community maintenance," she said. "Maybe you should try being a better neighbor instead of causing problems over something so minor." The contractor cleared his throat. Folks, if there's a property dispute, we probably shouldn't start any work until it's resolved. Liability issues and all that." The HOA president shot him a look that could have frozen helium. "There's no dispute," he said firmly. "The work starts tomorrow as scheduled." I went back inside and immediately pulled out my property file. Every single document confirmed what I already knew. The lane was mine. The survey showed exact measurements. The deed described the meets and bounds in painful detail. And there wasn't a single mention of any easement or shared access agreement. But these people clearly weren't interested in documentation. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when I heard engines outside. 3 pickup trucks were parked at the end of the cul-de-sac, and workers were unloading equipment. The contractor from yesterday was pointing at my lane and explaining something to his crew. I walked outside in my bathrobe and slippers. "Excuse me," I called to the contractor. "What's going on here?" He jogged over, looking even more uncomfortable than yesterday. "Sir, we're here to start the resurfacing work. The HOA said everything was cleared up." "It's not cleared up," I said. "This is private property and you don't have my permission to work on it." The contractor pulled out his phone and called someone. After a brief conversation, he handed the phone to me. "HOA president wants to talk to you." I took the phone. "This is harassment," came the voice from the other end. "We have every right to maintain community property, and if you interfere with this work, we'll take legal action." "I'll tell you what," I said. "You can take whatever action you think is appropriate, but if one piece of your equipment touches my property without my permission, I'll be taking legal action too." The contractor took his phone back, had another conversation, then started loading his equipment. I went back inside feeling like I'd won a small victory, but I knew this was far from over. I was right. Over the next week, neighbors started using my lane to turn around their cars. I caught one guy backing his boat trailer onto the first 50 feet of my lane and asked him to move it. "HOA board said we could use this area for overflow parking and turning around," he told me. "It's community property." I explained that it wasn't community property, but he just shrugged and said he was following HOA instructions. By the end of the week, my peaceful private lane had become the neighborhood's unofficial parking and turnaround area. I counted 6 different cars using it throughout the day, and that boat trailer was becoming a permanent fixture. Time to escalate. I spent the weekend putting together a formal cease and desist letter. I included copies of my deed, the original survey from when I bought the house, and a clear explanation of property boundaries. I sent it certified mail to every member of the HOA board with a request for delivery confirmation. The response came 3 days later. Not a phone call or a reasonable conversation, but a notice of violation that made my blood boil. According to this document, I was obstructing community utility easements and interfering with established neighborhood access patterns. They threatened to place a lien on my house if I didn't pay the $2,500 assessment by Friday and cease all interference with community maintenance activities. My wife found me at the kitchen table that night, staring at the violation notice and muttering words that would make a sailor blush. "What's wrong?" she asked. I explained the situation and she just shook her head. "You know what you need to do," she said. She was absolutely right. It was time to bring in the professionals. Thursday morning, I called the best surveyor in the county. Not the cheapest, not the fastest, but the one with the reputation for being thorough and accurate. I explained the situation and asked for a complete boundary survey of my property. "How soon do you need this?" he asked. "Yesterday," I said, "but I'll take as soon as humanly possible." He could fit me in the next week. Perfect. While I was waiting for the surveyor, I started doing some research of my own. I went to the county recorder's office and pulled every document related to my property in the surrounding area. I wanted to understand exactly how this neighborhood was laid out and what rights, if any, the HOA actually had. What I found was interesting, very interesting. The HOA had easements for utilities and drainage, but nothing that gave them authority over private roads or driveways. Even better, I discovered that their beloved community park had some boundary issues that they probably weren't aware of. The surveyor showed up the following Tuesday with equipment that looked like it belonged on a Mars rover. He spent 6 hours taking measurements, driving stakes, and cross-referencing historical surveys. When he was done, he asked me to meet him at his office to go over the results. "Well," he said as he spread the survey across his desk, "you've got an interesting situation here." He pointed to the map with his finger. "Your lane is definitely private property, just like your deed says, but there's something else you should know." He moved his finger to a different area of the survey. "The HOA's community park fence is encroaching on your property by about 4 feet along this entire boundary line. They've been maintaining a garden area that's actually on your land." I felt a slow smile spreading across my face. "How sure are you about this?" "I've triple-checked the measurements and compared them against every historical survey I could find. I'm willing to stake my professional license on it." "When can you have the official survey completed?" "I'll have everything ready by Friday." I thanked him and went home to wait. But I wasn't going to be passive about this waiting period. It was time to set a trap. I called the HOA president directly. "I've been thinking about our disagreement," I said, trying to sound defeated. "Maybe we can work something out. When are you planning to schedule the paving work?" I could hear the smugness in his voice. "We're glad you're being reasonable. The crew will be here Monday morning to start the resurfacing." "Sounds good. I'll stay out of the way." Monday morning arrived with perfect weather for paving. I was up early, making coffee and watching from my kitchen window as the contractor's trucks arrived. This was going to be fun. At exactly 8 a.m., three things happened simultaneously. The paving crew started unloading their equipment, my surveyor pulled up in his truck, and a sheriff's deputy arrived for what I had requested as a civil standby to prevent any potential confrontations. I walked outside carrying a folding lawn chair and set it up at the edge of my property. The surveyor started unloading his gear, and the deputy positioned himself where he could observe everything. The HOA president came running out of his house like his hair was on fire. "What's all this?" he demanded, gesturing at the surveyor and deputy. "Just getting some final measurements done," I said casually. "Don't mind us." The surveyor started driving permanent steel stakes with bright pink flagging tape exactly along the property line. The first stake went right where the boat trailer was parked. The second one was positioned so that it would block access to the lane from the cul-de-sac. Karen came storming across the street with two other board members behind her. "You can't do this!" she yelled. "This is community property!" I stood up from my chair and pulled out a manila folder. "Actually, according to this official survey, it's not community property. It never was. This entire lane belongs to me, and those stakes mark the exact boundary lines." I walked over to the contractor's foreman and handed him a document. "This is a formal notice of trespass. If you or your equipment touch any part of the area marked by those pink flags, you'll be working on private property without permission. I'm sure you understand the liability issues that creates." The foreman took one look at the document, glanced at the deputy, and started making phone calls. Within 10 minutes, his crew was loading their equipment back onto the trucks. That's when the HOA president completely lost it. "You're holding the entire neighborhood hostage!" he screamed, his face turning purple. "This is extortion! We have rights!" I pulled out my phone and started recording. "What rights are those?" I asked calmly. "We have maintenance agreements. We have authority over all roads in this neighborhood." "Did you check the county records before claiming that authority?" There was a long pause. Even Karen looked uncomfortable. "We don't need to check county records," he said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "We've been managing this neighborhood for years." "So that's a no then. You never actually verified which roads belong to the HOA and which ones are private property." The recording was golden. A board member admitting they never checked property records before claiming authority over private land. The contractor trucks were pulling away, leaving the HOA board standing in the street looking like they'd been hit by a truck. But I wasn't done yet. I handed the HOA president another document. "This is a formal demand letter. Your community park fence is encroaching on my property by 4 feet. You have 30 days to remove the fence and restore my property line, or I'll remove it for you and send you the bill." Karen grabbed the paper and read it, her face going white. "You can't do this," she whispered. "Actually, I can. That fence has been illegally encroaching on private property for years. The survey proves it." The group huddled together for a whispered conference. Then the HOA president turned back to me. "We'll fight this," he said, but there was no conviction left in his voice. "You're welcome to try," I said. "But you should know that I'll be filing this survey with the county today, making it part of the official record. I'll also be requesting that the assessor review your property taxes since you've been maintaining land that doesn't belong to you." That got their attention. Property tax issues were serious business. The next few days were blissfully quiet. No more cars turning around in my lane, no more boat trailers parked on my property. The pink flagging tape was doing its job. On Thursday, I got a call from a lawyer representing the HOA. "My clients would like to discuss a resolution to this boundary dispute," he said. "There's no dispute," I told him. "The survey is clear, the property records are clear, and the law is clear. Your clients have 30 days to remove their fence from my property. They're prepared to offer compensation for any inconvenience. The only compensation I want is recognition of my property rights and removal of the encroaching fence." "What about the road access issue?" "What about it? It's my private road, always has been." There was a long pause. "Would you be willing to grant an easement for neighborhood access?" Not a chance. The lawyer tried a few more negotiating tactics, but I wasn't budging. The law was on my side, and we both knew it. On Friday, exactly 1 week after the failed paving attempt, I got another call from the lawyer. "My clients are prepared to sign a stipulation of private property acknowledging your ownership of the lane and agreeing to remove the fence." I'm listening. "In exchange, they want assurance that you won't pursue damages for the false lien threat or the encroachment." I thought about it. Dragging this through court would be expensive and time-consuming, even though I'd probably win. Sometimes winning means knowing when to accept victory. "I want that stipulation to be recorded with the county so it's binding on future HOA boards," I said. "Agreed. And I want acknowledgement that they have no authority over my lane in perpetuity." "Agreed. And they pay for recording the stipulation." "Oh, agreed. The paperwork was signed the next Tuesday. The HOA board officially acknowledged that my lane was private property, agreed to remove their encroaching fence, and promised never to claim authority over my road again. The document was recorded with the county, making it legally binding on future boards and property owners. But the story doesn't end there. The failed paving project cost the HOA $5,000 in contractor fees for the wasted day. The neighbors who had been told they could use my lane for parking and turning around were furious when they learned the board had been lying to them about having authority over private property. Karen had to move her boat trailer, but thanks to my new fence built exactly on the property line, she could no longer make the turn into her driveway without a complicated 5-point maneuver. Every time I saw her struggling to navigate that turn, I couldn't help but smile. The best part happened 2 months later. The neighborhood held a special meeting to discuss the legal fees and failed paving project. The existing board was voted out and replaced with people who actually believed in checking facts before making claims. The former HOA president now has to turn his car around at the end of the actual cul-de-sac instead of using my lane like he had been doing for years. It's a much tighter turn, and I've watched him scrape his front bumper on the curb more than once. I installed a beautiful gate at the entrance to my lane with a sign that reads, "Private road, no turning." I also put up a security camera that has a perfect view of the area where people used to turn around illegally. Last weekend, I was sitting on my front porch with a beer, watching Karen struggle to back her boat trailer out of her driveway for the 3rd time when my wife joined me. "You know," she said, "I think they finally understand what private property means." "Some lessons are more expensive than others," I said. The whole experience taught me something important about dealing with bullies, whether they're on a playground or an HOA board. They count on people being too intimidated or too lazy to stand up for themselves. They assume that if they sound confident enough and throw around enough official-sounding terms, people will just give in. But when you've got the facts on your side and you're willing to follow through, bullies tend to fold pretty quickly. My duck around and find out file turned out to be worth its weight in gold. The surveyor's bill was expensive, but watching an entire HOA board realize they'd been making illegal claims for years? Priceless. These days, my lane is quiet and peaceful again. No unauthorized traffic, no boat trailers, no HOA president standing in my driveway making demands. The fence encroachment has been removed, and my property boundaries are clearly marked. Sometimes I still get mail from the new HOA board about community issues, but it's always polite and respectful. They've learned to check their legal authority before making claims, and they seem to understand the difference between public roads and private property. The former board members tried to blame me for the legal fees and failed paving project, but their neighbors weren't buying it. When you claim authority you don't have and threaten liens you can't enforce, the consequences are on you. I've heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Karen is considering moving. Apparently, the daily struggle with her boat trailer turn has gotten old, and she's tired of other neighbors reminding her about the expensive lesson in property law that she helped create. As for me, I'm enjoying my peaceful private road and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, when you stand up for your rights with facts and determination, the good guys really do win. The moral of this story is simple. Know your property boundaries, keep your paperwork organized, and never let anyone intimidate you into giving up rights you legally own. And if someone tells you that you don't own your own driveway, well, maybe it's time to remind them that assumptions can be very expensive mistakes. Trust me on this one. I've got the survey to prove it. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I live in an apartment complex and I have 2 neighbors, Martha and, let's call him Shaggy. You'll get why. Martha is a sweet old lady and Shaggy is a total and utter anus. He complained about the noise when I moved in. Although I tried to be as quiet as I can, some noise just can't be avoided. He complains about the noise if I so much as sneeze, and woe be me if I forget to clean the hallways when it is my turn. His favorite saying, "We have rules in this house." Whatever I do wrong, even the smallest infraction that a normal person would either overlook or seek a private talk about, got reported to the house owner, or the cops. I have nothing but trouble with this mofo, and I hate his guts. One day, I got the cops called on me due to a noise complaint at 9:50 p.m. House rules say that you have to keep the noise down to apartment level starting at 10 p.m. I immediately knew that the culprit was Shaggy, because Martha not only does not give a damn unless I make so much noise the entire complex is shaking on its foundations, but is also completely deaf without her hearing aids, which she removes every day at 8 p.m. sharp. While the cops are snooping around my apartment, they were called because there were screams and curses coming from my apartment, and they wanted to make sure I had not killed anyone, even though I had just burned myself something fierce on my stove and had vented my pain and frustration. And generally being a bother, one of them suddenly asks me, "Do you smoke weed?" and points out the window at the playground behind the complex. And that was when it hit me. Cannabis may have been legalized here in Germany, but the law states that there are places where you are simply not allowed to light up, like in the vicinity of playgrounds, schools, childcare facilities, etc. Makes sense, yeah? And Shaggy is a freaking stoner. Walks around with red eyes, his apartment and clothes reek of the stuff, and I have never seen him sober. He is constantly high as a kite, which makes arguing with him both scary and funny. Well, anyway, the playground behind the apartment complex means that the entire complex is a no-weed zone, even if you only light up indoors. Now, normally I wouldn't have said anything because I ain't a snitch and Shaggy keeps it indoors. But like I said, Shaggy is a beatard and a stickler for the rules. Well, two can play that game. I eventually got the cops off my butt, after they had looked into every nook and cranny and found no corpse, and told them to check out Shaggy, telling them about his weed use near a playground. Guess who got his apartment searched top to bottom and eventually arrested when he tried to attack an officer because he dared to touch his stash? "We have rules in this house, Shaggy," Auntie Edith says. 1. I know about Martha's hearing aid habits because I help her out with stuff, household work, going shopping with her, etc. While we are together, she likes to talk my ear off. Many old people like to talk if they have an audience, about anything and whatever. And a few times the topic of me being worried that I am too noisy for her liking came up, since Shaggy constantly complains. She just laughed and waved me off with a, "Just don't bring down the house and we're good. Besides, I remove my hearing aids in the evening at 8 p.m. Weird habit, I know. Haha. 2. The cops didn't kick in Shaggy's door, just on my say-so. They went across the hallway, rang the bell, and when Shaggy answered, they both took a step back upon the smell coming from his apartment. When they asked him if he's aware that there's a playground behind the house and that there are children in the house, kids of other inhabitants on the other floors, he became aggressive as in, "Piss off man is all good nowadays." The police then asked him to show them his stash because while weed is legal now, there is a limit to how much you are allowed to have, even in your apartment, 50 g and up to 3 plants per adult person. He refused, and the cops cited probable cause because he is obviously hiding something and could destroy the evidence if they waited for a warrant. They shoved Shaggy aside, he followed them in, and apparently the cops found way more than he is allowed to have because there was yelling, a commotion, and then Shaggy was lead out in cuffs with one of the officers sporting a black eye. The next one is an entitled people story. This happened back in 2022. I got a job in Bangalore and was new to the city. Being single and alone, I tried my luck in dating and matched with a lady who happened to be from my native place as well. We clicked instantly and started hanging out together on weekends. When she visited my apartment for the first ever time, I made for her fried rice, mashed tapioca, fish curry, and some beef roast since I came to know that she loved all of these homely food and missed them badly. Then, SHD made it a habit to visit me on weekends and specifically ask me to make them for her. Me, being a person who loves both cooking as well as feeding others, didn't bother about it much. On one of our dates, we visited a South Indian restaurant and was having a dish called parota, which is a bread item made out of flour. She commented on how the parota tasted awful and she knows to make it better. My dumb head politely commented that it sounds awesome and would love to try her parota once. She rolled her eyes and stared at me for some time and started lecturing me on feminism and stuffs. She went on explaining that society changed and women no longer cook for men. She went on lecturing that I should change the way I see women, I should be more mature, etc. She was loud enough that everyone around us could hear her lecturing, and I was so embarrassed and humiliated to the core. I didn't react, but it was a painful realization. I always paid for our food, cooked for her, gave her a good time in bed, gave the emotional support she needed, chauffeured her around, and picked her up from her workplace on late night, etc., all to be humiliated and disrespected. I silently dropped her to her place that day and ghosted her just like that, ignored every calls and texts. Funny enough, on the next weekend, she started massaging if I am making her the special food for her. The time I spoke up with a clear no. She was so surprised and shocked as if I am her maid and saying no to her. She then tried coming to my apartment, but since I haven't given her a guest pass for approval, the security didn't let her in. She tried to contact me multiple times and I blocked her from all my social media. Months later, she texted me from her office number stating that she missed me and I was the best thing that happened to her. I never bothered replying. Edit. Can see comments that I acted immaturely and ghosted without an explanation. I simply didn't want to waste my energy on a lost cause. At the end, she would be able to convince me since I loved her and I was highly empathetic. Better to cut a finger than let it spread and end up amputating your hand. The next one is an entitled people story. I still remember the day I moved into my home, full of hope and excitement for the future. The Homeowners Association's agreement promised to take care of any property damage caused by natural occurrences, and the responsibility of maintaining the underlying ground. Living in an area prone to erosion, this assurance gave me a sense of security. My property was slightly elevated with a nearby lake, so I initially believed that maybe, just maybe, this homeowners associations would be different from the horror stories I had heard. The first year passed without incident, but then came a series of heavy rainfall. The signs of trouble began to appear. The land beyond my property started to crumble and collapse into the lake. Although it wasn't directly affecting my land, I alerted the homeowners associations, hoping they would address the issue. However, they remained unresponsive, and the erosion continued. With each subsequent rainfall, the erosion grew worse, encroaching dangerously close to the guardrail the homeowners associations had installed. It became evident that my own property was being neglected, with no ground treatment or maintenance provided. I reached out to the homeowners associations multiple times through letters and phone calls, but all I received were generic replies and empty promises. It was as if my concerns fell on deaf ears. As news of another impending rainstorm reached me, anxiety gripped my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of jeopardizing the safety of my family. Determined to protect them, I took time off work and made the decision to leave for a vacation to visit my parents and explore new sites. But before departing, I sent a final reminder to the homeowners associations about the approaching storm and the lack of care given to my land. Upon returning from our trip, my worst fears were realized. Half of my backyard had vanished, swallowed by the relentless erosion into the lake. The shed, my wife's beloved garden, and even my children's swing set had all been devoured by the voracious waters. Panic washed over me, not only because of the debris that now polluted the lake, but also due to the looming threat that my entire house could be claimed by the relentless erosion. Driven by anger and frustration, I directed my fury at the homeowners associations, holding them accountable for their negligence. This time, I reached out to a lawyer determined to sue the homeowners associations for breaching the terms of our agreement. Suddenly, the homeowners associations was willing to engage in discussions, desperately trying to rectify the situation. They pleaded ignorance regarding the erosion and even argued that erosion did not constitute weather damage, despite its direct correlation. They attempted to offer me a paltry sum of $500, conveniently deducted from next year's membership dues. Their offer was an insult, and I made it clear that I would see them in court. Armed with a comprehensive trail of evidence, including the emails, phone messages, and the contract itself, I confronted the homeowners associations in the legal arena. Their lawyer stumbled through feeble excuses, claiming they were not responsible for my land's well-being, and citing non-existent loopholes. However, my lawyer astutely pointed out the explicit language in the contract, emphasizing the homeowners association's obligation to provide ground treatment to prevent erosion. It was undeniable proof that they were fully aware of the issue. The homeowners association's feeble attempts to evade responsibility crumbled under scrutiny. They tried to argue that I hadn't followed the correct channels of communication or lacked concrete evidence linking the erosion to the weather. But the judge saw through their feeble defenses and focused solely on the facts presented before him. In the end, justice prevailed. The homeowners associations was found guilty of gross negligence and ordered to pay me a staggering $360,000 in damages. It was a victory not just for me, but for every individual who had fallen victim to the homeowners associations' disregard for their obligations. Rumors began to circulate, exposing the homeowners associations' mismanagement and embezzlement of member dues. The aftermath of my lawsuit led to a wave of similar cases, with more people realizing the homeowners associations' misconduct and fighting back. The next one is a pro-revenge story. As we found out that we would be expecting not one, but 2 kids, we knew we had to move to a real house with more space. At the time, we were still living in a 1-bedroom studio 1 floor up from the ground floor. Its only entrance was a metal fire escape, stairs. Not ideal for a pregnant woman, let alone to live with 2 small babies. So we found a privately leased house that was newly renovated and had all the room and a large garden we were looking for. We signed the lease and immediately collected the keys. As the owner drove off, the woman next door came up to me, immediately demanding that we not make noise before noon as her boyfriend worked nights and slept in, and she had a whole list of other do's and don'ts. Right off the bat, we knew trouble was incoming. Since the house was fully renovated and not much had to be done, we decided not to poke the bear. We would do the things that made noise after noon. We moved in after 2 weeks and the whole street was warm and welcoming. My wife was almost due to give birth to my twin daughters, and some offered help with anything we needed. They were really kind people. They also told us about our neighbors. Nobody liked them. He was a big bully and got into arguments with everybody. They were also known as radio pirates, meaning they illegally broadcasted on the radio with all Dutch bangers. Their parties went on from Thursday to Sunday until 5 in the morning. Loud music, constant yelling, always drunken, etc. It was really something to look forward to when moving in, especially with 2 babies on the way. The partying began immediately, full blast. Quite classy for someone who demanded quiet when the douchebag needed his beauty sleep. Then one day, my father-in-law came to put new grass in. He parked his trailer at the back of our houses, which is public space. Not according to him, though. That exact spot where the trailer, full of grass sods, quite heavy stuff, was parked was his spot, and he demanded that we move the trailer. I wasn't going to do that, as I didn't plan to walk all the way around the house with the sods. He got angry right away and demanded that I move it. I told him to go screw himself. I was done with him already. I'm also a ginger, so besides having no soul, I do have a temper, which is always in check until you repeatedly provoke me. Anyone who knows me will tell you that you really had to make an effort for that to happen. We went on working, and at the end of the day, my father-in-law wanted to leave. He hooked up the trailer, and there was the douchebag telling him off, yelling that it was his spot and he better not do it again or else. Mess with me all you want, I can handle it. But what you don't do is threaten my family. I ran outside and told him in no uncertain terms to back off or he'd be the sorry one. Total bluff on my side? Yes, I have that temper, but I'm not impressively built and have no hidden fighting skills. I do fight dirty. He backed off, my father-in-law left, and I went inside where I found my wife crying. She was scared that he might do something to her father or me, and we didn't need that right now. Combined with hormones from being pregnant, you can imagine the picture. I was even more pissed off, but had to promise not to act on anything. I won't, dear. Not yet, anyway. Time went on without any real incidents, and then the time came when my wife went into labor. It didn't go smoothly, and she ended up having to deliver via C-section because our second daughter was almost strangled by the umbilical cord. We had to stay 3 nights, and they were excruciating nights for a lot of reasons. Finally, we got to go home, and our family had put a giant sign in our front yard welcoming the babies. The sign had already been up for a few days prior to our return, so our friendly neighbors definitely knew about it. But did they give a flying duck? No, they did not. From the first night on, they started partying and blasting their terrible music. They started at noon and continued until 5 or 6 in the morning. Classy. They kept it up for days, so it wasn't just Thursday to Sunday. It was all week long and into the next. We were broken, hardly slept. One of our daughters suffered from heavy cramps combined with all the noise, and her parents were at the end of their wits, so she cried a lot. And then I had just had it. I researched some things about radio pirates, the laws and regulations, and his large antenna, 5 meters or more, in his backyard, which was illegal in itself. But he used it to illegally broadcast on the radio, which meant he had a lot of equipment to do so, which was even more illegal, and could even get him jailed. At the very least, they could seize it all and fine him big time, somewhere in the range of 10,000 to 45,000 euros. Now, I didn't immediately turn him in, but instead looked for another house to lease first. This was because I figured it wouldn't sit well with him, and having a wife and 2 babies alone in the house during the day while I had to go to work was risky. I hear you guys thinking, why not involve the police? Well, they are utterly useless in cases like this. We called once, and what they did disturbs me to this day. They rang their doorbell and immediately started off by saying we called them about noise complaints. Yes, you read that right. No protection or anything. Just blatantly told them we were the reason they were there, told them to keep it down, and that was it. They didn't even follow up with us or anything. As you can guess, the douchebag was even more pissed off and told me the next day, or yelled over the fence that separates our backyards, that I really should not do that again. It was a threat yet again of which I told the police. I didn't report it the first time as I chalked it up to alpha male behavior and the heat of the moment. But without witnesses to corroborate, nothing could be done yet again. Some days later, I walked out the front door and he just stepped out of his car. He came up to me demanding that I cut back some of our ivy that grew on our side of the fence because it was tangled with his big-ass antenna. He said he would be gone for a few hours, and I could come into his garden to cut back the ivy that had grown through to their side. And then a light bulb went off in my head. I told him politely that I would do that immediately. Why? Because that gave me the opportunity to find out the make and model of his antenna to ascertain its signal strength, where the cables went exactly and what kind of cables they were. I also wanted to get a good view of the equipment he had through the window so I could take some photographs of it. This was the icing on the cake. Meanwhile, we had managed to find a new home, and we had already signed the lease, so we would be gone in 2 weeks. Luckily, we only had to paint the girls' room and pack up our things to move them to the other house. After I trimmed the ivy and collected my evidence, I went online that night to find out the proper channels to report a broadcast pirate and which entity was tasked with catching said pirate. It turned out I had to call the telecom agency, but also the police. I wasn't too happy about involving the police, but I remembered I have a nephew who works for the police. Officially, his area was immigration, but he knew enough colleagues who could help us and whom we could trust not to confront them again, saying I was the one who sent them. That was extremely important for our safety in doing what I was about to do, so I gave both the agency and the police all the evidence I had collected and pointed them to the frequencies he pirated so they could listen in. Then they started a neighborhood investigation, which wasn't really necessary. But we wanted to cover our bases and make it look like he got caught by accident, because they had an active investigation in our area. You never know what he could learn from legal documents and such. We asked them to wait with the raid. Yes, they raid pirate houses, preferably in the early hours of the day when he's asleep, rendering him incapable of fleeing or hiding evidence, etc. We moved 2 weeks later, and they raided his house 2 days after we moved. All of his equipment, computers, radios, cell phones, and his car were seized. He left in handcuffs, and his wife-girlfriend did too, for making a big scene and trying to interfere. All of this was live, reported to me by one of my former neighbors who were equally ecstatic about this. It turned out this wasn't the first time he got caught, but his third time. His car had no insurance, and it failed its MOT. This would normally have no significant consequences because he didn't drive it while it was raided. But they had been surveilling him for a week and saw him driving it without insurance and a valid MOT. He was fined somewhere around 30,000 euros, went to jail for 12 weeks, and everything that was seized was destroyed except the car. His girlfriend had to do 40 or so hours of community service. They had to sell the house, which made the other neighbors very happy as they were also done with them. Like I said, I do fight, but very dirty. You really have to make an effort to push me to that point. They did, and they suffered. Over a year later, while shopping for groceries, I encountered them. They gave me the foulest looks. If looks could kill, I'd be a smoldering heap of ash. But it ended there, nothing more than that. Wow, folks. I'm kind of surprised by all the appreciation. Gold and silver awards, wholesome, masterpiece, helpful, bravo grande, and so many upvotes. Thank you all, kind people. I honestly don't know what I can do with gold or silver, but I promise you I'll spend it by giving back. This difficult period in our lives has turned into something better this way. The next one is a petty revenge story. Neighbor's son, Garth, graduated from college about this time last year and got his first full-time career job at a company. He's in the IT department of a branch office and handles IT tasks. The total number of employees at this office is around 20, with some in sales and others working in the office. Karen is the office manager. When Garth first started, there were 3 IT people who had an office in the basement, away from the rest of the employees. This arrangement suited Garth just fine. He's a quiet, introverted young man. He's highly intelligent, but not very social, preferring to spend his time off gaming rather than engaging in live interactions. As you can imagine, he's not a big guy, maybe $1.50 after eating a big steak for dinner. The other 2 IT people eventually moved on to other jobs, but the company didn't replace them. Now Garth has 3 times the workload without receiving a raise. Garth voiced his concerns about the workload and call-outs to Karen, but he received the standard feeble corporate responses and a condescending lecture. I don't know why he didn't quit then, but he stuck it out, hoping to eventually be recognized for his worth, etc. Whenever I spoke with him, he would mention how bad it was working for Karen, but his saving grace was that he was in his solitary office most of the day and didn't have to have much contact with her. Until one day back in February when he received a phone call from Karen telling him to come upstairs. Upon arriving, he was directed to start moving furniture around. Garth took a look around and told Karen that his job does not involve moving heavy objects. Karen got loud and questioned his manhood in front of everyone, but Garth didn't budge. Life changed for Garth after that. Karen had decided to make work miserable for him. She started repeatedly writing him up for whatever she could think of. Here comes the petty revenge. Garth started snooping and discovered that Karen is having an affair with a married coworker. Their work phones are synced up to the computer system, which Garth has access to. Garth created a mass corporate email with various screenshots of their sexting. He rigged it to be sent out today from her own email account. The beauty of it all, Garth walked in on Friday and tendered his resignation to corporate HR. He left his ID card and whatever else on Karen's desk. Karen made a big deal of shouting at Garth as he was leaving, "Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out!" When the email is sent out, they may well suspect that Garth was the perpetrator, but they'll never be able to prove it. I can only hope Garth's revenge is sweet and spectacular. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened in Sweden about 40 years ago, and even if my memories may be a bit hazy, the gist of the story is absolutely true, even if the details are a bit off. I had bought an old clunker of a car to get to my new job, and when I say clunker, that is being nice. It was mainly held together by gaffa tape, and it cost me a whopping $100. Kind of temporary until I got my first paycheck. On my way home, one of the few police cars in my small town, approximately 25K, pulled me over, which was indeed understandable as it was around midnight and the car being what it was. But it was actually roadworthy, and their issue was with the road tax. They said it was unpaid and that it was illegal to drive the car. However, they knew who I was because my dad was the district court judge, so they allowed me to drive home while following me, so I'd actually go home, I guess. I complied, of course. When I parked outside our house, they said they had to take the plates off the car, and that I could pay the tax the next day, go to the station, show the receipt, and get the plates back. Fine, I said. They started rummaging in the trunk of their car, and discovered someone had pilfered their toolbox. I offered them to take the keys instead, but nah. They asked if I had a screwdriver in my car, and I said no, had just bought it. I started to talk about other options, but the boss cop told me to just go sit in the car and stay quiet. Not another word from you, little missy kind of attitude. I complied, of course. I was just about to say I could fetch a screwdriver from the tool shed, but they weren't interested in that. I do think they were worried that I'd wake the judge. Oh, horror. Or not. So they opted to call the one other car they had roaming the town that night. A K-9 unit. And that got noisy. We lived near the park, so of course those cops figured it was an opportunity to let the dogs stretch their legs. Sigh. Well, I obeyed orders, sat there, was quiet. They were not. First, my father came out in his robe and slippers, looking slightly frazzled and confused. Not exactly someone to be afraid of, but I just sat there as instructed, because I knew what would come next. My mother, "What are you doing with my daughter?" Well, it went downhill from there. Don't think my dad said a word, but my mom certainly ripped them a new one, and got kind of famous on our street the next few days. Could have been a very quiet and nice interaction here, but, well, they wanted to make a big deal about the missing tax payment, so a big deal they got. For 10 cents. Simple typo. The next one is an entitled People Story. Something bizarre happened to me yesterday. I was pulling into a parking lot when the car in front of me suddenly came to a complete stop in the middle of the lane. Its owner, an older white man, turned it off, got out, and started walking into the nearest store in the strip mall. He just parked his car in the middle of the lane. I could have gotten around it if I really tried, but it would be dangerously close to either his car or other parked cars. I lightly tapped my horn twice at him, seeing as how I was essentially stuck now. He turned around and I rolled my window down and said to him, "That's not a parking space." He dramatically pointed at my car and then did this right this way motion with both hands, sort of aiming at the very narrow path that I guess he thought I should be able to get through. I repeated myself again, "Sir, that's not a parking space. I can't get around you." Him, "Why is it that one of you people every time, just go around?" So he's done this before? Me, "Sir, what are you doing? That's not a parking space. I need you to move." Him, "I need you to mind your own business." Me, "Come on, you can't park there. Please just move your car." At this point, his lips were doing that weird shake that old people do when they hang their mouths open. I guess he thought he was being intimidating? He stepped up to my window and yelled, "Him, you want to make me?" Okay, so he's done this before and he's being an aggressive jerk? Now I've read on here where other people have interacted with older Karens, and there's apparently a card that you can play that bypasses this sort of attitude. Me. Sir, are you okay? Do you know where you are? Him. What? Me. Are you with someone? Is there someone who's supposed to be helping you today? Him. What are you? Me. Do you need help? It sounds like you don't know where you are, and I'm worried for you. Is there anyone I can call for you to help you? I think he caught on to me at this point, because he switched back from confused to being angry again. Him. I don't know. Is there anyone I can call for you? Is that somehow a threat? I don't, Tico. Me. Sir, it's okay, don't worry. You just stay right there and I'll call someone who can come help you. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Just don't move and I'll call for an ambulance. At this point, I backed into a parking space that had opened behind me and pulled out my phone. I really was going to call cops, but only because he was too confrontational to be left unattended in public. Of course, as with most bullies, the moment they realize they don't have power over you, he gave up, muttered something, got back in his car, and left. On my way out of the lot, I saw that he had miraculously found his way into a parking spot on the other side of the lot. The next one is an entitled People Story. It feels surreal to finally share my story after 6 long years of enduring the tyranny of a homeowners association. The relentless pursuit for justice, the destruction of my property, and the incessant demands to pay homeowners association fees have all culminated in a dramatic and thrilling conclusion. Now, with the dust settled, I can proudly say that I have emerged victorious, standing tall against the homeowners association. To understand the full extent of this battle, we must rewind further back to when the homeowners association was first established. In my neighborhood, the homeowners association was optional for existing residents, but newcomers were automatically enrolled. Being one of the few holdouts, I staunchly refused to join, dismissing their persistent requests as mere junk mail. I had no interest in becoming entangled in their restrictive regulations. In their desperation to enforce their authority, the Homeowners Association created a group of self-proclaimed officers, individuals who wielded power without any legitimate authority. These officers began tormenting me, demanding payment for Homeowners Association fees despite my non-membership. Their actions escalated from mere annoyance to outright destruction when they raided my property, tearing up my lawn, vandalizing my windows, and subjecting me to sleepless nights of incessant doorbell ringing. Fearful yet resolved, I attempted to involve the police, but the officers always managed to elude capture, exploiting their self-imposed vigilante status. Fed up with their illegal activities, I sought legal representation and initiated a lawsuit against the Homeowners Association. To strengthen my case, my lawyer advised installing video cameras to document the ongoing harassment. Throughout the arduous 6-year legal battle, numerous hurdles complicated the proceedings. Debates arose regarding my ability to sue the Homeowners Association as a non-member, which threatened to prolong the case indefinitely. Meanwhile, the emergence of the pandemic further delayed the legal process, leaving me vulnerable to continued harassment, while justice eluded me. However, as life gradually returned to normalcy, I finally gained momentum in my lawsuit against the Homeowners Association. Unbeknownst to them, I possessed irrefutable evidence of their actions, captured on video. In court, their faces turned ashen when confronted with the undeniable proof of their wrongdoing. Their futile attempts to discredit the videos by claiming lack of consent to record on my own property fell flat, as the law unequivocally supported my right to protect my personal domain. Ultimately, the Homeowners Association was found guilty of harassment, but it was the extensive property damage that served as the focal point of my lawsuit. Years of destruction had taken their toll, discouraging me from repairing the damages, knowing they would be targeted once more. The Homeowners Association, realizing the weight of their misdeeds, reluctantly ceased their arguments, fully aware that their defeat was imminent. Now, 6 years since the ordeal began, the final court decision has been rendered. The Homeowners Association is ordered to pay me a staggering $200,000 in restitution for their relentless harassment and property destruction. Any future interference in my life, including sending solicitations to join the Homeowners Association, would result in additional fines. Moreover, an independent investigation has been initiated to scrutinize the Homeowners Association's officer program, potentially exposing further violations of local laws governing homeowners associations. While the financial compensation is indeed significant, I find myself more exhausted than celebratory. This prolonged battle has drained me, leaving behind a sense of weariness rather than triumph. I can only hope that the Homeowners Association's officer program is dismantled, ushering in a new era where residents are no longer subjected to unwarranted harassment. Although I had hoped for the dissolution of the Homeowners Association itself, I am heartened by the fact that others, inspired by my victory, have come forward to challenge the Homeowners Association's authority, hiring their own legal representation to seek emancipation. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This story isn't about me, but my dear old dad. Back in the day, he used to be a plumber. He then went on to join the military, where he sustained various injuries and chemical exposure. Anyway, this happened during the time when he was fighting for his disability. On occasion, he would do side jobs just to get by. It was very painful and difficult work for him, but alas, the bills needed to be paid. At the time, he had a neighbor up the road who needed some pretty serious work done in his home, and offered to pay my dad a bit over $3,000 for the labor. To be frank, $3,000 was a bit on the low end for the work, but my dad figured, hey, help a neighbor out, and he really needed to make some extra cash. The holidays were coming up, a little over 2 months before Christmas. The guy buys the supplies, my dad does the labor, with promises that he'll be paid when it is finished. You already know where this is going. Surprise, surprise, the work gets finished, but the guy doesn't pay up. Not only does this guy not pay my dad, but he has the gall to laugh at my dad and ask him what he's going to do about it since the work was under the table. Neighbor be damned. Oh, was he, my dad, ever pissed. I remember when he flat out told me, that son of an idiot might not ever pay me, but he's going to be paying someone that $3,000, just you watch, sweets. And he got to work. He couldn't spend a lot of time on his feet, but he had quite a few hours to kill, and he started planning this dude's comeuppance. He went to the store and bought a bunch of jacks, the kind that come in the game of jacks, with the rubber ball and whatnot. He then proceeded to spend the next couple of weeks sharpening them up and making the ends into little spikes. Every time he would drive by this guy's house, he'd casually toss a handful out the window into this guy's driveway. You can imagine this guy was constantly getting flat tires and had to continuously repair and replace them. Fast forward to Christmas Day, my dad calls me up, cackling hysterically, so I ask him what's up. This is actually one of my favorite memories of him. He tells me, remember that neighbor? The one that ducked me over? Well, I just drove by his house, and he, the wife, and the kids are all dressed up for church, standing in the front yard by their car, and it's got a couple flats. You see, I think he wised up because he started parking in the grass, but the mother ducker didn't know I threw them in the yard too. I love my dad. The next one is a petty revenge story. I, 35M, have a younger brother, Todd, 29M, who had a complicated birth and had to stay a month in the ICU. Because of this, my parents have always doted on him and denied him nothing, even if it was to the detriment of my sister Abby, 32F, and me. Todd revels in the attention and has on more than one occasion made himself the center of attention at either my sister's, or a cousin's special event. Because of this, Abby and I have a strained relationship with Todd and our parents. Unfortunately, Todd met and fell in love with Lucy, 24F, who announced her own pregnancy at the baby shower my mom held for Abby. When I proposed to my wife, Michelle, 30F, I initially wanted to elope. However, she really wanted her family to be there. So I invited my family out of obligation. While out, my best man, Jim, 35M, noticed a receipt from a jewelry store that slipped out of Todd's pocket. Jim confronted Todd about this, which led to an argument. Jim told me everything, and I informed Todd that he would no longer be a groomsman because I knew he was going to propose at my wedding. Todd cried to our parents, resulting in a blowout. In my parents' eyes, since Todd never admitted that he planned to propose to Lucy at my wedding, they believed I was unfairly judging him. I refused and brought up Todd's past behavior. My parents couldn't refute this and convinced Todd not to attempt anything at my wedding. However, this wasn't enough to convince me to let him be a groomsman. I warned him that if he tried anything as a guest, he would regret it. Fast forward to the wedding, and unsurprisingly, Todd walked over to Lucy and proposed to her during Michelle's father-daughter dance, making sure everyone noticed. That's when my revenge took place. Jim and I had hired a woman to pretend to be Todd's lover. She cornered Todd and Lucy, claiming to be pregnant with his baby. Todd denied it, but when she called his phone, I provided her with his number and tampered with Todd's phone to incriminate him. It didn't look good for him. Lucy threw the ring back at Todd and left in tears. When Todd saw the smile on my face, he knew it was me. I didn't respond to a single call or text from him or my parents until after the honeymoon. Lucy has thrown Todd's belongings out and is denying him access to their child. Todd is furious and demands that I clear his name. I sent him a text saying I had no idea what he was talking about, along with a screenshot of the wedding bill. I also vaguely demanded reimbursement for half of the wedding costs. Michelle knew the whole time what I was planning and gave me the green light after Todd ruined her moment with her dad. I felt pretty good, but now even Abby thinks I went too far. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A little background info. I live in a popular tropical tourist destination, and one of my jobs is as crew on a snorkel boat. I set up the boat before the trip, lifeguard, give history about the area, etc. My captain is also the owner of the business, so what he says goes, and he knows the local waters like the back of his hand. Our company consists of him, me, and his girlfriend who manages bookings, phones, and emails. We aren't low quality, but we don't offer full meals or entertainment on board and focus solely on the snorkel experience. Because of that, compared to the larger boats, our private charters are lower cost than most competition. In turn, we often get penny pincher people. Onward to the main story. A family of 22 had been hounding our office before they even arrived at our location, according to our office. They were pushy and trying to get discounts and free upgrades, so I was already dreading this charter. Generally, we take a card number and charge it before the charter, but this group was adamant about paying cash. The office and captain said fine, but told me to get payment before getting them on the boat. Our boat is 50 feet long and stays moored offshore a few hundred yards, so we use a water taxi to ferry from the shore to the boat. I got dropped off to get payment, check the group in, and give them pre-boarding info. I walked up to the main guy paying for everything to start the process, and that's when things went downhill. M = me, G = guy. G: hello, which boat are we going on? M points to our boat. That pretty one right there. G: that's not the boat we are going on. M: yes it is. There isn't any other boat, sir. G: no, the boat looks like this. Shows me a photo of the boat from our website. M: yes sir, that is the same boat. We just had the bottom and paint replaced a month ago. I guess our office hasn't updated our website. Sorry about the confusion, but I assure you it is the exact same boat. G: well, I don't think you're trying to deceive me, but then why would they send me that photo? M: I'm sorry, I'm not sure what to tell you. It is the same boat. G: well, I think we need to go out and inspect it and look at it before we decide to go and pay for it. M: I'm sorry, sir, that's not how this works. We've already set up the boat for the charter and blocked any other bookings to accommodate your private charter. You can pay and we can take your family out for their excursion, or you can decide not to go. We haven't received payment from you, so we have no obligation to you and no money to return. What would you like to do? G: then we don't want to go on the boat. M: okay, sir, sorry it didn't work out. You and your family have a good day. I picked up my stuff, turned around, got in the water taxi, and left them on the shore. As we rode away, I could see the guy already on the phone trying to call the office. I called his bluff, and he was panicking because his whole family just heard him say they didn't want to go, even though many of them did. I got back to the boat and explained to the captain what happened. He said it sounds like he doesn't want them on his boat anyway, and it's their loss. We had planned to refuel after their trip, but decided to do it now since we now had the morning open. They were still on the shore when we left, but were gone when we got back. Once back on shore, the other guys who run activities in the same area told us the group had hung around for about an hour. I guess the guy was very convinced we would come crawling back, but when we didn't, the family started fighting since many of them still wanted to go. Now they have to try to find another boat that has 22 spaces open and will most likely cost 3 times more than us. It was totally worth waking up early without pay. The next one is an entitled People Story. I live on a dirt road, and while I own it, 3 other families have the right to drive on it to access their properties. All good. Where the road curves over time, gravel has built up well off the road and visually made that portion look like an abandoned parking lot. A sad sight next to my forest of trees and our sparkling river. In the blazing heat of August, I toiled. I scraped up the gravel, watered, to force more gravel up to the surface, scraped, hauled, raked, and sweated. My neighbors shook their collective heads as they saw me working. 3 dump trucks of soil arrived, raking, smoothing, and finally joyful planting. A small flowering tree, hundreds of lily bulbs, daffodils, grass seed bushes have replaced the gravel wasteland. Now my phone rings. Mr. Wonderful, the neighbor at the end of the road, wants to talk to me. We meet at my work site. He wants me to explain what I am doing. Fine, I explain. He tells me my work is a waste of time. Fine, I am okay with trying. He informs me that the whole community uses that area as a turnaround. The whole community is him. No one else would ever need to use it. I am still okay. I tell him that if he needs to drive on my grass a bit to turn his boat around, I am okay with that. He asks why I did not tell him what my plans were. I come up with some version of what? Why would I check with you about planting grass on my yard? And oh, by the way, you have driven past me doing this work for days. If you were so interested, you could have asked. But now you know I am planting grass. The mask dissolves. His 6+ self hops off his golf cart and growls, "No, I am going to tell you what you are going to do." Mr. Wonderful informs me that the land is not legally mine as he is claiming it through adverse possession. I laughed. I am 5'1" and was totally terrified inside, but I am not going to cede an inch. Towering over me with spit flying, he screams that I can expect to be in court facing a judge because he is not giving me his property. And the threats keep coming. By now, other neighbors have come over to witness the fuss. He keeps at it. When he stops for a breath, I say to everyone, "I am so glad you are all here. I am planting grass on my property. If you are called to court to testify, please do not worry about offending me. I will not be angry. And regardless of the outcome of the case, if any of you need to encroach on the grass to turn vehicles around, you have my full permission. Except for you, Mr. Wonderful. You are never to touch my property." The next one is an entitled parent story, so a bit of backstory. I'm a 28-year-old woman who recently went fully blind. When I was a teenager, I volunteered with my local youth group to help rebuild Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. While I was down there, I picked up a fungal parasite called histoplasmosis that migrated to my eyes over a decade and slowly caused blindness. I've been totally blind for about a year now, so I'm pretty new to it, but I digress. When I first went blind, I barely left the house and was afraid to go in public. I felt like everyone was staring at me, and honestly, I barely knew what I was doing. The transition had been difficult, and I didn't have any support group to teach me. One day, my husband asks if I can take an Uber down to the bank and deposit a rent check, and I reluctantly agree. While I'm out, he messages again and reminds me that we're out of a few crucial groceries. There was a Walmart grocery store literally across the street from the bank, so I figure everything in life is an experience, and I'll have to learn how to shop alone eventually. So why not? Everything was fine at first, and I was only grabbing a few things, so I didn't need a cart. I was using my cane and what little echolocation skills I had at the time to get around, but I was still bumping into things as we blind tend to do sometimes. My cane suddenly hit something a bit softer, and I figure maybe I had whacked someone's leg and apologize. Cue entitled kid, EK, and entitled mother, EM. Me, shoot, I'm sorry. EM, hey, you just hit my son. Me, I'm so sorry, ma'am, I didn't see him there. EM begins yelling, how could you not see him? He's clearly right here. Now I'm fully blind, but I don't wear sunglasses. Mostly because I can't afford a good UV blocking pair. But also I'm not ever looking for pity or to play the part of a generic blind person. I just want to be treated like a normal person. But I do understand her confusion as blindness is a spectrum, so I try to calmly explain. Me, ma'am, I'm blind. I can't see anything, let alone your son. That's why I have to use the cane so I can get around without. She cuts me off. If you're blind, why aren't you wearing big sunglasses? Now, as a blind person, I get a lot of stupid questions, but I understand that many of them come from people who don't know better, so I try to happily answer as many as I can. Me, those are really expensive, around $200 for a good pair, and I really don't need them inside. EM, you're not blind, you're faking it. Here is where my blood starts to boil. I can't think of any reason someone would want to pretend to be blind. It's an actual hell. And nothing pisses me off more than when someone calls me a liar when I'm not. Just as I'm about to respond, I feel a tug, and before I blink, I realize this little demon spawn has snatched my $100 cane from my hands. For those of you who don't understand, that's like if you're shopping, and suddenly the power goes out and you can't see a single light. Without my cane, I can barely move at all without crashing into anything. My voice gets shaky as I begin to panic. Please give that back, I really do need it. M, no you don't, you liar. My son deserves to play with this more than you. I hear her shuffle away, and my expensive cane cracking into metal displays and such as they leave. I start crying and waving my arms in front of me to grab onto something, anything, and end up crashing and falling into a center aisle display, making a loud scene. Without fail, I somewhat curl into a ball and cry. I'm alone in public, in the dark, and I have no idea what to do. Suddenly, I feel a hand on my shoulder and a man's voice, we'll call him AG for awesome guy, asks if I'm okay and tells me to stay right here. I do, but begin to at least sit up and listen. This man must have been tall and built like a tank because his footsteps sounded like a giant's, and I felt a suction of wind when he took off. Maybe about 30 or 40 feet away, I hear this loud bellowing like an angry lion and a loud crash. Then, before I know it, the man is back and helping me to my feet. He takes my hand and puts my cane into my palm and helps me pick up the items I dropped when I fell into the display. Me, wiping tears from my cheeks. Thank you so much. I didn't know how to handle that. AG. Don't worry about it. Some people are just monsters. This guy restored my faith in humanity and even helped me finish shopping and get out of the store. As we're leaving, I can hear the familiar screeching of EM. Something about AG grabbing the cane and pulling hard, flinging her little devil child into a shopping cart. I don't know if she was exaggerating or not, but it would explain the crash I heard. It's easy to feel alone in a world without sight, but even through the sheer terror of being stripped of my cane, at least I know now that there are people willing to stand up for me when I need it. The next one is an entitled parent's story. I'm allergic to fish and seafood. It's not the anaphylactic type of allergy, thank goodness, so I'm not going to die if I eat some, but I do throw up, have a stomach ache, and get a massive headache for a few hours. If I consume enough fish or seafood, I break out in small red hives over my arms. My mother didn't believe it, and as a child I couldn't stand up to her properly. She would force me to eat dishes with seafood or fish in them to prove I wasn't allergic and then ignore me when I got sick. One day she held a dinner party. I was dressed up beautifully and brought out to parade before the guests. At the time, I was around 9 years old, precocious for my age, and absolutely fed up with my mother making me sick. When she held out a fish cutlet, fish cooked with vegetables rolled into a ball covered in batter and fried, for me to eat, I saw my chance. Me loudly. I can't eat that, I'm allergic to fish. Mother. No, you're not, eat it. Me. I am allergic, I'll throw up. No Asian mother will back down in front of guests for fear of looking like she can't discipline her child. My mother grabbed the fish cutlet, shoved it in my mouth, and said in her most firm voice of command, "Eat," so I ate it. Cut to about 10 minutes later. I went up to my mother and tugged on her sorry to get attention. Me. I don't feel well. Barf. I vomited on her on the expensive carpet and in full view of all the guests. My mother has a reputation for being a kind, generous, charitable, and very religious woman. So in front of all the guests, she couldn't do anything except act sympathetic and send me off to bed to recover. She never made me eat fish or seafood again. My daffodils came up this spring, the lilies are sprouting, and no court summons has arrived. The next one is an entitled people story. In the quiet neighborhood where my wife and I resided, an insidious figure emerged, the self-proclaimed Homeowners Association's president from hell. This tale, filled with treachery and vindictiveness, recounts the multitude of atrocities he committed against us. However, what began as a mere clash of wills escalated into a harrowing battle that would forever change our lives. Our guide dog, an indispensable companion for my blind wife, became the first target of the Homeowners Association's president's spiteful campaign. Despite our rightful claim that service animals were exempt from size restrictions, he vehemently insisted that our beloved dog violated the community's rules. Unable to win his argument, he resorted to a more sinister plan. One fateful day, we discovered our faithful companion gravely ill, having ingested poison. Swift veterinary intervention saved his life, but suspicions grew. Investigation revealed that the Homeowners Association's president had laced dog treats with toxic substances, intent on removing the giant dog from the neighborhood. Though the evidence eluded us, we remained resolute, vowing to unveil his malevolence. The relentless assault on our lives continued as the Homeowners Association's president set his sights on my prized possession, a cherished Buick GSX. Ignorant of its value and ignorant of the bylaws, he demanded its removal, hurling threats of confiscation. Armed with knowledge, I challenged his authority, presenting the rules that sanctioned my car's presence. Enraged by his failed attempts to control us, the Homeowners Association's president orchestrated an act of vandalism. He callously maneuvered his RV, mercilessly crushing my classic car, reducing it to a mangled wreck. Unbeknownst to him, a vigilant neighbor captured the dastardly act on video, providing the irrefutable evidence we needed to expose his true nature. With the legal battle looming, we embarked on a journey towards justice. As the court proceedings unfolded, the Homeowners Association's president's lies crumbled before the judge's discerning gaze. The truth emerged, painting him as a malevolent force hell-bent on causing harm. The court ruled in our favor, awarding a substantial settlement of $300,000, delivering a resounding blow to his hubris. But the story didn't end there. The wheels of justice continued to turn. Charged with animal cruelty and property destruction, the Homeowners Association's president faced the consequences of his actions. Though imprisonment eluded him, he received a fitting punishment, sentenced to community service and burdened with a criminal record. Stripped of his position, he was cast aside by the very community he once ruled with an iron fist. As the legal battle raged, we delved deeper into the depths of his deceit. Our relentless pursuit of truth exposed his clandestine operations. A supposed luxury goods business turned out to be a web of deception and money laundering. An anonymous tip led authorities to investigate further, unraveling his scheme. The IRS swooped in, revealing his hidden income and fake merchandise, leaving him bankrupt and on the brink of ruin. Facing financial ruin and the loss of his wife, the Homeowners Association's president's empire crumbled. With no one to turn to, he fled, leaving behind a wake of shattered dreams and broken promises. Our quest for justice had not only toppled a corrupt leader but also unearthed the extent of his criminal activities, ensuring he would never again prey upon unsuspecting victims. In the aftermath of our ordeal, we emerged stronger with a renewed sense of purpose. Our fight against injustice had left an indelible mark, not just on our lives, but on the entire community. The once dreaded Homeowners Association's president became a cautionary tale, a symbol of the consequences awaiting those who abuse power. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I was visiting my friend at his dad's house in an area where the land is so steep that all the driveways have to switch back up from the main road to the houses. A straight driveway is not an option because it would be steeper than the building code allows. A few doors down the road, there lived a nice old couple who until recently had a vacant lot next door to them. But the lot had been sold, and the new owner had started construction on a new house. Unfortunately, the lot was so steep that the new owner built his driveway partly on the old couple's land. It was carved out of the hillside with an excavator. This probably wouldn't have been a big deal if the new owner had approached the old couple first and asked nicely, but did he? Would I be telling this story if he had? In fact, the old couple had no idea what was happening until they came home one day to see a huge scar in the hillside snaking up from the road in front of their house, across the corner of their property, and winding upwards to where an excavator was working to prepare the land for their new neighbor's house. They were pretty upset, but being nice, reasonable people, they figured it was an honest mistake, so they went over to talk to the machine operator. He didn't know anything useful, but he was happy to give them the phone number of the new property owner. The old guy gave him a call and politely explained the situation, but his new neighbor, whom he'd never even met, was having none of it. He flat out denied that the driveway crossed the property line, and he was rude enough that the old guy was pretty upset. At this point, the old couple weren't sure what to do. They double-checked the property pins to make sure they were right, and of course they were. But after further conversations with the new owner, it was clear he was an unreasonable guy who wasn't going to come to the negotiating table willingly. The old couple didn't want to take legal action because that would have been expensive, and frankly, the damage to their yard was already done. At the same time, they couldn't just let someone walk all over them like that, especially if they were going to be living next door for the foreseeable future. So the situation stewed for a while as construction continued on the new house, until one day when my friend's dad saw the old couple in the neighborhood, and they started chatting. Of course, they told him the story about the new neighbor. Now, my friend's dad really likes the old couple who don't have a mean bone in their bodies, so he was pretty pissed about the situation, and when he went home, he couldn't get it out of his head. That evening, after a few beers, he had a brilliant idea. He called up the old couple, explained his plan, and asked for their permission to carry it out. They chuckled and gave him the go-ahead, so he hopped into the rusty old full-size pickup he kept as a second vehicle and drove it over to the old couple's place, where he parked it across the encroaching driveway, making sure it was entirely on their property. The next morning, the work crew arrived bright and early to find that they couldn't drive to the house they were building because some jackass had parked a crippy old F-150 across the driveway. They saw the note in the window with my friend's dad's phone number on it, so they called him to ask what the hell was going on. He explained that he had permission from the owners to park there and that no, he would not move his truck so they could get to work. Furthermore, if anyone attempted to tow the truck, they would be charged with trespassing and theft. There was no way the construction guys were going to haul all their tools up the hill by hand, and they didn't want to get in the middle of a legal battle, so they just called the new owner to let him know they'd be taking the day off and that they'd continue to take days off until the property boundary dispute was resolved. The new owner called the old couple in a fury, but the old couple told him the same thing my friend's dad told the construction workers. Basically, the vehicle was parked on their own property, so if he had a problem with that, he could go duck himself. To make an already long story shorter, the new neighbor ranted for a while, but eventually he wanted his house to be built. So the nice old couple ended up with a significant sum of money in exchange for an easement, allowing the driveway to pass across the corner of their property, and my friend's dad got several thank you cases of beer and the satisfaction that comes from putting an a-hole in his place. The next one is a petty revenge story. So, when I was in high school, I was on the speech and debate team, if you're unfamiliar. Think drama club meets Young Democrats, Young Republicans. I mostly did the public speaking events that focused on real-world political topics, and I loved it. I usually made it to finals in my events, but I had fun even when I didn't and made some really great friends from other schools. If I wasn't in finals, I would go watch others who were competing to support my teammates. There was a girl I saw at almost every tournament. Let's call her MM. And I didn't do any of the same events because she focused more on the drama side of speech and debate. But M was constantly comparing herself to other people and would get really arrogant if she made it to finals in her events, and I didn't make it to finals in mine. Anytime she didn't make it to finals in her events, she would cry and accuse the judges of not being fair, and would then pout in the cafeteria throughout finals, and sometimes wouldn't even go to awards to support her teammates who did win something. In conversation, she was also a big one-upper. You could never talk about anything fun or cool you did because she'd always done something cooler or more fun. If you've ever seen Glee, she was a real-life Rachel Berry. She and I are still friends on social media, although we haven't personally spoken very much since high school. I've watched her flaunt now 2 different failed engagements, along with a slew of random jobs that never seemed to work out for very long. I don't post as much on social media, so she didn't really know what was going on in my life. My long-term partner and I found out in early March that we were pregnant. We had been trying for a baby and didn't think it would ever happen because we had been told by doctors that our chances of conceiving naturally were slim. So this baby means everything to us. Before we even got pregnant, we had agreed on a name for our baby if we were to have the boy we both wanted. In high school, my grandmother had told me that if she had ever had a son, this was the name she was going to give him. However, she only had 2 girls. I fell in love with the name immediately and told her that if I ever have a son, I would give him this name. She passed away while I was in college, but I'm still in love with the name and fully intend to honor that promise I made to my grandmother. Thankfully, my partner also fell in love with this name when I told him about it. Flash forward to the present day. My partner and I were about a week away from finding out if we were having a boy or a girl, and then one day on Instagram, I see a post from M announcing that she is pregnant with a boy. She's due 2 months before me. At this point, I hadn't announced my own pregnancy publicly yet, so M didn't know, but some of our mutual friends knew. One of them, who was really close to her, informed me that she had shared her baby name list with her and that the name my grandmother picked out was on the list. M had specifically said that she remembered me talking about liking that name at a speech tournament in high school and that the name had stuck with her ever since, particularly because the name is shared by her favorite poet. She told our mutual friend that that name was her top choice, but her partner had a different preference, so they were still going back and forth about it. My partner and I recently found out that we are also having a boy and are using the name we love regardless of what M names her baby, because what difference is it really going to make, especially because we don't even live in the same state and these children will probably never meet. It's also not a unique, rare name by any means, so to us it feels silly to act like only one of us can use it. But this is where I got my small dose of petty revenge. After we learned the gender of the baby, we decided to go ahead and announce our pregnancy publicly. And since we already had his name picked out, and it's something we know we're not going to change our minds about since it has so much sentimental value, we decided to include his name in the announcement. So M learned that I was also pregnant, having a boy, and using the name I loved. I would be lying if I said that I hadn't thought about M's reaction when my partner and I made the decision to also announce our baby's name. M hasn't said anything to me about the baby or about our name choice, but apparently she has had a lot to say to our mutual friends. She said if she can talk her partner into it, she still wants to use that name for her son, and that since her baby will be born first, if I do end up using it for my son as well, then I'm just copying her. She has apparently become obsessed with trying to find out details about my pregnancy and my relationship with my partner since I don't post as much on social media. She's been harassing our mutual friends asking about me, to the point where several of them are starting to cut ties with her because it's getting to be too much. Even her partner has reportedly told her that she's going overboard and has apparently vetoed this name for their son because he thinks she's too weirdly fixated on it and me and wants her to stop stirring the pot. So I'm having a baby with the man of my dreams, getting to finally use the name my grandmother fell in love with decades ago. And as an added bonus, my friends from high school are finally seeing how weird M is for the way she constantly tries to compete with different people. The next one is a malicious compliance story. In the 1980s, I was the general manager of a cable television company. Of all the reports we had to generate for our corporate office, the converter reconciliation report was probably the most important. Every cable TV office in nearly every company had to complete one monthly. If you're of a certain age, you'll remember the converter boxes that connected the TV and the cable so that the customer could tune in to all the channels. Well, let me tell you, they were expensive, and we had to account for every one of them every month. Many were in customers' homes, but others were on technicians' trucks, in inventory, in repair, lost, stolen, and so on. The converter reconciliation report told us how much of this important asset was in use and where it was. It had to be correct, and it had to be in corporate's hands monthly without fail. The company was run by a bunch of disorganized idiots. Every month I would submit this important report to corporate, and they would call, wanting to know where it was and why I hadn't completed it. Every month I would have to send them another, and they would call again, angry, and I would send another. Wash, rinse, repeat. 4 or 5 times every month they would lose my report and call, threatening to fire me for not getting the report in on time. I was always in trouble for allegedly not sending my converter reconciliation report. Cue malicious compliance. Having had enough of corporate's BS, I took the completed converter rec report and made 22 photocopies of it, 22 being the average number of workdays in a month. I put one in each of the 22 envelopes addressed to the corporate office, put postage on each envelope, and then made sure that in each day's outgoing mail, one report was sent. Sure enough, the angry phone call came. Manager, where's your monthly converter rec? Me, should be in your mailbox, did you check? Manager, oh, here it is, okay, thanks. A few days later, manager, where's your monthly converter rec, damn it? Me, should be in your mailbox, boss, did you check? Manager, oh, here it is, okay, thanks. Wash, rinse, repeat. Finally, after about 3 weeks, I get a phone call. Manager, why do I have a stack of the same converter rec report? Me, I just always want you to have one handy, boss. After that, they quit losing my report. The next one is an entitled people story. We were booked to go out for a meal for a teammate who was leaving. He asked to go for an Indian. I'm a celiac, and this is one of the places where I can always get food without worrying about cross-contamination, so for once, I was able to accept the invite. An hour before we are about to leave, one of the people on a different team says that he doesn't want to go for an Indian, but instead wants to go to the local brewery for a meal and a beer. The guy whines until my teammate agrees. When they go to leave, I wish my teammate good luck in the future and hope he enjoys his evening. Cue a shocked look from him. Why am I not going? Dude, we've worked together for 3 years, and you know I'm allergic to gluten, and you want to have a leaving do in a brewery where they make beer around where you eat? My teammate looks shocked and tells me it's not a big deal, just come. Seriously, it's a big deal. He says that he wants me there, and I say, it's okay, but I really can't go to that place. The guy who forced the change of venue overhears it and tells me I'm being difficult. I should just suck it up. Just because no one wanted to go for an Indian, I shouldn't sulk. The thing is, I get it. It's his leaving due. He gets to choose where he wants to go, and if I can't attend, then I can't attend. That's just how it goes. I try to minimize it and not be a pain. They made it into an international scandal by doubling down on me and calling me out for not being a good colleague. I packed my bags and left. Now here's the karma. The beer was off, and they were all ill the next day. The microbrewery got closed down a few weeks later. When the guy from the other team was moaning the next day about how ill he was, he turns to me and says, "You're lucky you didn't go because you'd have been ill too." "What?" I ask. "Yeah," he says, "you'd have been ill from drinking the beer." I looked at him and said, "You really don't understand why I couldn't go to the brewery at all, do you?" In the end, everyone who went to the meal had to go home and were off for a couple of days, apart from one teammate who turns out doesn't drink. I left a few months later as the whole place was toxic. The next one is an entitled parent story. This happened yesterday on the bus to a pub with myself and 4 of my friends. We are LGBTQ+ and Gothic, so I want you to imagine what we looked like. Not on the job. I am a childcare professional and work in a nursery near my home. I work in the preschool, ages 3, 5, and am very well received in my field. Other nurseries often request my help with observations, room design, parental-related issues, etc., so I am often spotted in nurseries that are not mine and often have conversations with parents I would never usually cross. There's my backstory. Now on to the story. My friends and I are on our way to our local pub on the bus on a Saturday evening. We aren't incredibly loud, but it's an empty bus and we're jolly. When a mother and young boy come onto the bus, I recognize her, although I have no idea where from. I try to keep my head down because I also don't want to interact with any work responsibilities. She sits down away from me, and I sigh thankfully. I go back to our conversation and forget about it. I want to stress we are 10 minutes from being in the clear. The mother stands up and walks towards us. I notice instantly and nudge my friends to quieten down. "Hello, aren't you OP from my nursery?" "Yeah, that's me. I'm sorry, I recognize you, but I can't place you. Which nursery do you go to?" "Another nearby nursery." "Ah, lovely. And he's in the preschool, right?" "Lovely place." "Yeah, it is. You look a bit different from work. I almost didn't recognize you," she said, and her face scrunched up like actually putting her nose in the air. Haha, yeah, well, I'm often in a uniform and no makeup, so this is what I usually look like, I guess. The group was silent, she was silent, I was silent. It was so awkward for like 2 minutes. My friend to my left cleared his throat and said, "Is there anything else? Are you drinking?" "Yes." "Don't you have work?" No, there is no nursery on the weekends," I said. "Well, aren't you on the clock for babysitting?" "I do babysit often. However, parents have to book in advance, and I'm free this weekend." "Well, what if there is an emergency?" "I think parents have family members that could help. Like I said, they have to book in advance." "Aren't you at work on Monday?" "I am, but I won't drink tomorrow. I will just recover." "Don't you think that's irresponsible? Also, what if some parents see you drunk? That's unprofessional." "It would be unprofessional if I was working, but I'm not working. I have the weekend off." "And what if you see one of your kids out?" "They're not my responsibility outside of work. Of course, I will always be delightful and kind, but they are not my responsibility." "But don't you think it's unprofessional?" My friend started laughing at this point, purely because she didn't seem to grasp the fact that I wasn't working. "No, I don't. I believe I am allowed to go out and spend my free time as I choose, much like everyone else." "Right, and you think dressing like that is appropriate?" "Yes, because I will be going to a club after the pub. It has been lovely seeing you, but this is our stop, so I'll have to say goodbye," I said. It was not my stop. My stop was the next stop, but my friends had been drinking, and I do not trust them. We all got off and had a few minutes of walking, but none of us could stop talking about the interaction. My friend walked into the pub and scoped the floor, making sure no parents with kids were there. "Okay, the floor is clear. My name can enter," she said, and I laughed as I walked to the table. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.